Welcome to our 9th session for this year's Cape Town Conversation. The title of this session is Investing in Data Centers. Can the Global South maximize economic benefits and minimize environmental costs? My name is Basant Hasib. I'm an assistant professor of political science at the London School of Economics and Political Science programs at the European universities in Egypt. Joining me today, a stellar group of experts on the topic. We have Jitin Jain, Chief Executive Officer of Cybersecurity at Voyager InfoSec India. We have Erin Watson, Managing Director at Baker & Young, Australia. And we have Shalini Kapoor, Chief Strategist of Data and AI, XTEF Foundation, India. Like any transformative technology, data centers, they bring tremendous benefits, but also significant challenges. Data centers recently have become the invisible backbone of the digital economy, and they are driving innovation from AI to cloud computing. Building and operating data centers, they come with local benefits that actually accelerates the economic progress from creating jobs to infrastructure investment. However, they also come with an environmental cost. Data centers, they use vast amounts of energy that actually emits significant amounts of carbon, and actually they lead to a global rise in fuel prices. They also use vast amounts of water because of their cooling systems. They use land, they use raw materials and minerals, and they result in electronic waste. These economic benefits and environmental costs are unevenly distributed between the global north and the global south. The global south has more than 50% of the world's internet users, meaning that most of the demands on digital services, from streaming, from AI and cloud applications, they come from the global south. However, the global south has only 10% of the global data center capacities, and most of the data centers, they are located in the global north. This means that most of the economic benefits of hosting data centers, they go to the global north. And even though most of these data centers, they are located in the global north, we have a disproportionate share of the responsibility, the environmental responsibility and accountability that is mainly imposed on the global south. And as the global north continues to consume electricity, they will continue to emit carbon, and they will use the remaining size of the carbon budget. And because this carbon budget is very limited, they leave little room or little space for the global south to emit what it needs to, for their economic development without surpassing the climate limits. And here, Jitin, I would like to start with the conversation with you on the economic benefits and the environmental costs. Now there is a consensus, global consensus, on the negative impacts, negative environmental impacts of data centers. The question is, should the global south invest in building data centers? If yes, what are the benefits and costs that the global south can expect?
You know, I think if you were to go in these data center debates 5 years ago, you will hear the same arguments that these are power-intensive data centers. You require huge, power. They will put loads on existing power grids. Power grids might collapse because countries have shortage of power. Then you heard arguments like, you need water. In countries with shortage of water, you will not be able to sustain data centers. Then you heard these arguments like, of capex expenditure, that why should poor countries in global south invest in these data centers without no guarantee of returns. And then from last 1 or 2 years, you are listening to this new propaganda of carbon emissions, where you are saying that, look, you will contribute to carbon emissions, there'll be environmental costs, and that is why you should not build data centers. I think this is sheer propaganda of global north, and it should be called out honestly. In my opinion, see, this is the new age of reindustrialization. These are going to be the new industries. Data center is not some building with some servers. Data centers are the beating hearts of new sectors like AI, telecom, finance, healthcare. There is no sector today which can survive without a good data center. So in my opinion, global south must build data centers with or without carbon costs, environmental costs. If you don't, you risk getting digitally colonized. We have seen in last many, many years, and look who's preaching this whole propaganda of why you should not build data centers just because of economic costs. These are the same very countries which build their empires by burning fossil fuels, burning coal, oil, setting up heavy industries. They build prosperity. And today they are the ones who are preaching global south that you should not build your prosperity because of the, our guilt of past of what we have done. So you see, if you don't do it, you are looking at a risk of losing out on AI jobs. You'll be locked out of the innovations in AI, health, and telecom. So the cost of building data centers with environmental concerns and carbon emissions is great. I understand that. But cost of getting left out, cost of losing your talent, cost of losing innovations is far greater. So in my opinion, I think if you do not own data centers in your own country, your data will travel to foreign countries, and whoever will have data will have intelligence, and they will resell your intelligence, make money. So it's better to have your data on your own country to ensure that it is, and look, you have to look at this entire debate from the construct of national security and data sovereignty. No country today wants their data to be in hand of foreign countries. And how can you expect in a fair world that 60–70% of internet users in the world should not even hold or store 5% of their data? Data will be monetized, people will make money. So I think Africa should, or India or global southern countries should monetize their own data, make money, ensure data is safe, and the prosperity through economic sovereignty and data sovereignty is delivered. So in my opinion, I think we must build data centers, we must own data centers. If required, we must emit a little so that we can innovate better tomorrow.
Okay, so following up on this point specifically, regarding the strategies that they can use in expanding the idea of sustainable data centers, what strategies can help the Global South in expanding its data centers in a way that both supports sustainability and energy affordability in the time where global fuel prices are increasing?
See, there is going to be an environmental cost. You will contribute to carbon credits. But look what is happening in US. Here you are being told that you can't build a 70 megawatt data center because of this environment concerns. At the same time, these very countries are ganging together, bringing old competing private companies in their country together on the same board, making them invest $500 billion to build a 10 gigawatt data center, which is like 200 times of, or 70, 80 times of what we are seeing today in any country. I mean, the biggest data center today is like, what, 200 megawatts, and they're going to build 10 gigawatts, which is almost 20,000, 10,000 megawatts of data centers. Where are the environmental concerns in those? Now they are talking about like, look, we know American grid today can power a project like Stargate, which Trump is building. So you need a nuclear reactor. So they're talking about using a portable nuclear reactor to power those data centers. But when it comes to these countries, you are listening to these arguments of, what are the environmental costs? I think, see, the whole, this narrative, if you go to an a Western country about the control over internet institutions like ICANN and other things, they say that data is global, so data should be hosted in US. It is a global common. So you should throw the same argument back at them that if data is global, then the cost of data, cost of hosting data should also be global. It should be paid by every country. And here, I believe that you have to differentiate between data centers owned by the countries in the global south and the data centers owned and set up by the Western companies, but put in these countries because of economic benefits, cheap land and policies, and being able to manage through bribery and other things. So if there is a data center which is being set up by the local government or a local company, it should be given benefits. I mean, because you are going to host your own data, it should be seen from the concept of national security. But suppose if there is a data center set up by Amazon or some private company in here, then I think the cost has to be borne by the globe. You let American, different companies, climate institutions finance the cost of the environmental cost of the data center. You can't throw the burden at global south that you can't, you can't expect global south to stay offline just because you want to monetize their money. And I must tell everyone that if you don't store your own data, you risk getting mined along with your own data and being exported to the global north. So if you don't build data centers, by the time you wait for this green energy to come in this global south, there'll be AI 4.0, data center 4.0, and you'll be still exporting raw materials to these people.
Shalini, I'll come to you now. There has been a shift in the conversation towards climate tech initiatives as a powerful enabler for a cleaner, more resilient, more sustainable digital infrastructure. In your opinion, to what extent do these initiatives like the renewable energy farms, for example, how can they offer real advantage and help the Global South in attaining their economic and environmental goals?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me here. So, see, in a data center, let's understand that when a data center is built up, there are some myths and there are some realities. The myth is that data center needs very high-end skills to build, to construct. Data center actually does not lead to a lot of job creation and skills simply because there's a lot of automation in the industry. There's a lot of automation and there's a lot of equipment which is brought on from different parts of the world for it to come together. So it's not impacting jobs as well, but what it does impact is definitely, I mean, we all know energy, and when energy, especially in AI, the demands have increased immensely. For example, a Google search today takes 0.3 watt hours of energy. Think about that if you do a ChatGPT search, how many times would it be? Any guesses? It's 10 times the cost. So it's 2.9 watt hours which will cost for a ChatGPT search. So the demand on the industry for, even if I take within this room and each one of you is putting a ChatGPT query, it is going to be huge energy demand. Now, if a country looks and puts up the renewable energy agreement, that itself changes the entire game of providing energy to that data center. And when it is renewable energy, and as in Global South, we are the best in solar power and also a lot in wind power because of the kind of turbines which can be put together to harness wind energy. So wind and solar are two areas where if we as countries invest and put that renewable energy, there's also some energy cost, or there's some cost involved in the battery storage part of it, which can be offset if you just give it back to the grid. But this can be a game-changing mechanism to get your power purchase agreements done with large big techs and have your own data centers. For example, Amazon, they are in India especially, they have two regions, Mumbai and Hyderabad, 100% on renewable energy, and you should see the energy farms which have come up in the states of Rajasthan and Maharashtra just to furnish energy to these two data centers, and it caters to several ASEAN countries as well, the data center usage. Now, the usage is the most important part to convince a big tech like AWS or a Google or a Meta, because actually all of them they completely understand that there need to be environmental givebacks that they have to do and they have to offset the cost. They understand it very well. But it's up to the country to get into that agreements with each of these big techs and tell them that the capacity to have renewable energy is present and hence a data center can come up. But the usage is what convinces them to come to a country or not come to a country. Because if we do not say that we have the startup system or the entrepreneur system who are going to bring the usage of the GPUs, usage of the CPUs, then the entire business model of the data center fails for them. But if the business model is there, it's a renewable energies, the wind, the solar farms, which can completely offset the cost, and that powers. So it's economic benefit because you have had new kinds of energy models, which can even power some of your other, not just data centers, but some of the other industries, because you have built up new capacity. You have built up a capacity of creating renewable energy, and then you can be the, it can be powering your factories, it can be powering some other energy-intensive mechanisms. So that has worked well. The power purchase agreements, and it has also given a lot of independence to have your own sovereign AI. And that's where I agree to what Jitin said, that if you want to have your own sovereign AI, your own data, usage is one you handle, and on the other, the capacity through the renewable energy, and then you can keep the data within your own geographical boundaries.
Since you've mentioned Amazon, and given your experience at Amazon Web Services, where you have led the public business sector, and the AI for Good initiative, which you're currently leading, could you give us some examples of how the societal deployments can actually help the community around data centers? And in what ways the partnership between data center operators, climate tech innovators, and the civil society environmental advocates could actually accelerate the deployment of breakthrough solutions to decarbonize digital infrastructure?
Yeah, sure. So I'll give some examples because I used to work with AWS. I work with the XTEP Foundation now. But when I was with AWS, I was leading the data center business as well in terms of oversight and how CSR can be applied. The sustainability initiatives can be applied. So in India, 2% of your profit is compulsory, mandatory. It's mandatory to dedicate towards some of the social give back, social responsibility commitments that you have to do. So, if you are earning, say, 10 rupees, out of that, 2% of the 10 rupees is what you put back to for the societal benefits. Now, what this has led to is that the data centers business, when they show their profits, they empower, and the rule says that, and that helps sometimes, putting the rules help the societies around it. So that money is coming back to the societies around the data center. So there are children's schools who are getting better education. There is skilling on AI to the youth in and around the data center. There are lake preservation and water conservation funding civil societies who have been working in and around data centers because there is an impact to water, there is an impact to lake, there is an impact to the effluent. So the civil societies, with that money from the data center, who are giving and working with the civil societies to work around the geographical location of the data center, and that gives the power back to the society. We used to do some impact assessments of these programs as well to see, have the skills, say the skills of the students and the young youth, is it improving? How many people have been trained, say in AI or say in the latest technologies, or how the water conservation methodologies have been taught, and is there any water saved? How much is the water saved? And how the societies around the data center can benefit. So these are programs which, initially it sounds that, you are making it compulsory, but actually if you see that, it impacts us, this is the give back declaration in a way which the data center is doing, so that they are giving back, and it's 2% of your profits, and that also engages the employees. And what I've seen is that there's so many employees who come out because they want to, it becomes an employee engagement activity as well. The society is powered, the people feel comfortable because there might be certain movement, displacement of infrastructure and displacement of real estate and homes of people. So they have to be catered to, they have to be attended to. So in a way, it engages the society in and around the geographical premise of the data center, and it also gives civil societies a way to engage with people all around. So these are some of the mechanisms which have worked. Can more be done? Yes, of course. I think a creation of a data center does have an impact on the environmental areas in and around, and there should be definitely more engagement and more, I would say, a give back. More of it should be done, and why should we restrict it to just 2%? That's what I think.
Thank you, Shalini. And now moving to the global north, Erin. I know that Australia has done some work in trying to balance between the economic impacts and at the same time sustainability of digital infrastructure, including data centers. How do you assess such initiatives and endeavors by Australia?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's been interesting to listen to you both speak and sort of hear your concerns, and I've sort of got 3 points to make. And just to be clear, I definitely don't speak for the entire global north. I very much speak for Australia in this conversation. So there is huge investment into data centres in Australia. So Amazon recently announced $20 billion investment in new data centres in Australia. This is a very live conversation. I was doing some work ahead of this panel, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of debate out there in Australia about the value of data centres. Do they really deliver on jobs? Do they really deliver on employment? I think that's really questionable in Australia. So this is a very, very live conversation, and there is a lot going on. So that's the first point that I will make. But Jitin, the second point I'll make is around how this debate is so similar to sort of the post-industrialisation conversation around fossil fuels that you mentioned, right? So, in Australia, not being strangers to this conversation, where our entire economy is built on essentially 3 commodities, while at the same time trying to transition to this sort of clean energy agenda that the current government has. And that's all well and good for us as a developed, rich economy or country, when we then say, well, actually, India, as you develop, you shouldn't be having the same benefits from fossil fuels that we have enjoyed. And there's a lot of similarities I'm seeing here between that sort of old conversation that is still very relevant today, and there's always political sacrificial lambs like the Adani coal mine in the northeast of Australia. But there's a lot of similarities there, and now we're saying, okay, well, Australia, you've got the data centres, you've got the economic benefit of the data centres, you're leading in development and digital infrastructure, but at the same time, it's we're saying to you, well, actually, you can't do it. So there's a paradox there again that's very, very similar. So that's the second point that I'll make. The third one, though, is that we've been having a conversation about these big tech companies and so on, and I think from the Australian perspective, it's quite interesting because Australia isn't afraid to pick a fight with big tech companies. We've seen that with News Media Bargaining Code. We've just introduced a social media ban for under 16s in Australia, so kids can't go on Instagram. Well, I mean, there's always ways around these things. These things aren't perfect, but the Australian government, whether it's our current government, which is the Labor government, or if it's a more conservative government, they're not afraid to have arguments with tech companies. So this idea that we were talking about before, that tech companies will just come in and be these sort of super, these super tech powers, I actually think Australia knows how to push back, and has done, and has really sort of, in some ways, not crippled is the wrong word, but certainly cut them off at the knees. It's very, very popular politically to fight with the tech companies in Australia, particularly when it comes to, whether it's, kids, jobs, all of these sort of very political issues in Australia. So they're the 3 observations I'd make from the Australian perspective.
Thank you, Erin. I'll go back to you, Jitin, on the issue of the negotiating power of the Global South and concluding investment deals with big cloud companies. Initiatives like green data centers, as Shalini mentioned, they can help in strengthening the operational resilience of companies, but also they can help in strengthening the business reputation in a time where climate responsibility becomes crucial in business deals and in securing investment deals. To what extent, the question to you is, to what extent can the Global South actually leverage their growing digital market and their geopolitical value in negotiating cloud data center investment deals with big companies that is also conditioned on sustainability and the commitment to developing local green skills?
Yeah, before getting into the negotiations and signing the deals, first we must learn how to deal with the West. So, I would agree with Erin. You rightly mentioned that Australia, despite of being a developed country now, is now investing into renewable energy for data centers. I think all of us must learn from Australia. Let's build data centers, even with carbon emissions. Let's innovate. Let's make some money, because the only thing today, what is really green is a dollar. Once you make money, once you make prosperity, then you can transition into green. You can look for green energy resources, but while you can't just wait for green energy resources first and then decide on building data centers, I think that won't work, because you'll lose out on innovations, you'll lose out on prosperity. So let's follow Australian model. Let's build first, make some money, and then go green. That will sustain. Second, about this agreements. I think Global South must learn the art of weaponizing the agreements, which we have been on the other side of receiving in many, many things. 10 years ago, we were, sold this drugs of how this, social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter are harmless. They are global commons. They are for global good. Then 5-7 years ago, you saw this global, inter-country platforms like Swift were sold that, these are global commons. They will never be weaponized. No country will really own them. Even if they're situated in the West, Globe will totally run it. No country will have sovereign control. But when it came to a conflict in Ukraine and Russia, you saw Swift being weaponized. A country at the size of Russia being kicked out of Swift. So one thing is very clear. Technology and data will be weaponized tomorrow. So you better be on the right side of that weapon. Right? And I'll give you an example. Suppose you have a data center, a 10 megawatt small data center, and cost of renting that data center for 100 years, let's say, is $1 million. Now, a company like Amazon might build a data center with $100 million here. If you were to give them an offer that, look, there is an African government-owned data center, which we will give you a 50% discount, let's say only for $50 million, will you put your data in that data center? They'll say no. It is not about cost. It is about data. It is about monetizing data. You look at companies in WhatsApp. How many employees in WhatsApp? Any guesses? Any guesses how many employees in WhatsApp? Not even 100,000, not even, few thousands. But look at the valuation of the company. When they sold WhatsApp to Facebook, the valuation was not done on the number of employees. It was done purely on the quantum of data and number of users. So data center jobs does not mean 100 people working in a data center typing or fixing something. No, it means the innovations you will create, the IP patents you will create, the technologies you will create, the public infrastructure you will fire, the growth you will create in the country. The pride of the country, the strategic security, the data sovereignty, it is all about that. This whole propaganda of cost, environmental cost, carbon emissions, power grids, it's all farce to ensure that you don't get into this business of, hosting and controlling data. In my opinion, that we must weaponize the agreement. You require land, power, water, data, and a lot of, security for data centers. These are not, consumption commodities. These are strategic assets. You must learn how to leverage and you must learn how to negotiate contracts with them. You can get into a power purchase agreement with a green company that is harmless. But when a private company at the size of Amazon, Microsoft, Google come and invest in your country, you must make sure that instead of allowing them to set up their own data centers, they must rent a data center which is owned by an African company, which creates wealth and prosperity for Africa. That is how the art of negotiation and deal should be, not by looking at the number of money or the numbers of dollars you will pay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, if you don't mind me jumping in, Jitin, I think it's a really interesting proposition. And when we talk about this idea of the global north and south when it comes to technology, I think, one thing that the global north, and let me just speak for the entire global north now, but one thing we need to do better is understanding that countries in the global south are often have technology that's leapfrogged ahead of us. Now, I think the India stack is a perfect example of that, where, you know, you can push and push and push a country like Australia to integrate UPI in the ways that other countries have, but they don't take the technology seriously. They don't go, oh, India could have possibly come up with a better and more interesting system that can unlock value and create value among, you know, the diaspora and NRIs and these people who are on that system. So, like, we have to get better at going, actually, you have the technology, you might have the infrastructure, and how do we come and meet you there? Because often the model is, okay, well, we'll help you develop some data centres as a development model versus being a true economic partner. And that's what we have to shift our mindset from, is, this is, we go from being a development partner to a true investment destination or an economic partnership. And I think that's a real challenge in the global north, in the mindset.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. I mean, if you look at India and China, we form together the biggest internet users and mobile users, smartphone users number in the world. The only reason India has been able to fire this great economic growth and digitalizing the entire financial sector, because we built everything from the scratch, right from our unique identity to UPI to scale payments and direct benefit transfer or things like ONDC. We built everything from the scratch. We were not gradually growing. We wanted to leapfrog, and it's better to build in this age something right from the scratch and build it right, rather than to build something over and over it and improvise it. It will take, I think, a decade for the West to realize that global South can develop something better than them. It's a mindset problem, right? Second, they can never imagine a scenario where 90% of the world's data is hosted in the global South. They want 90% money in the West, 90% data in the West, and 90% carbon costs in the South. That's a model which is not going to be acceptable any longer, because people are waking up. Countries are realizing the value of sovereignty. You have seen many, many countries, getting into, fights with Twitter, Facebook over things and things. People thought these are new age governments. These have become Lord Viceroys of the new age digital colonies of the world. But I think the companies which are building data centers like, Stargate projects, they are not going to be the new government, they're going to be the new empires. And trust me, especially countries like in Africa and Southern Asia, like India, we have seen the cost our generations have paid for, slavery and colonization. And trust me, digital colonization is going to be worse. We paid 20, 25, 30 generations for colonization. If you allow your data to go out, they will train their AI on your life, your culture, your history. They will change everything, and trust me, at least 50 generations will pay for this digital colonization. So I think, in my opinion, leave the West, develop your own, benefit for your own people, make prosperity for your own. And this is what my belief is, that data centers are the new engine of digital sovereignty, and we must ensure that our sovereignty stays within our land.
Yeah, sure, go on.
So I think it's very important that we be smart enough in the negotiation that we do. And when I say smart enough, while we say that, the number of users are more and maximum, like, if you see Anthropic's or OpenAI's latest report, actually India is number 2 in terms of the users. But it's not just the users which count when you create a data center. Let's be very clear, it's the enterprise usage which brings the business model of a data center alive. And when we say enterprise usage, it could be the retail commerce, it could be the payments, the banks, and all of them coming together to think that yes, and to agree that we will keep the data within the country. So when we have to be smart enough to bring up a data center, you might need switches, routers, chillers, coolers. Today, these are sourced from across the globe. There's not just like one country. There are several providers. Options are there. It could be in Taiwan. It could be in China. It could be in US or India. There are several organizations. So what needs to be done is that smartly we figure out as a country that, if What is the enterprise usage, say, for all the payment gateways, for all the banks, all the retail commerce, and make that situation and that, or pool all those things together to negotiate better. In fact, Australia negotiated very well. I remember a case where for their GovCloud, their own government usage, they negotiated a big deal where they said that we need to have sovereign. The entire command center should be in our control. If something goes down, then we as a country, if 3 hours outage is there, then all the data stays here. There should be no backup with US, and there is no heartbeat also going back to US. They negotiated it very well. So that negotiation happens only because as an Australian government, they brought in huge billions of dollars of usage of their citizens, and they said, we are now in the position to negotiate. So doing that negotiation of your own enterprise usage gives you, and because people will talk about commercial, the profitable interest. So that bringing it all together makes a lot of sense for every country. And then whether it is big tech, whether they'll all be coming because they have arms, ammunitions, is the routers and the switches. That's what they want to sell that. They want to get that used. But then you have to bring the usage of enterprise together as a negotiating.
Thank you, Shalini. Before we end, because we have two extra minutes, Erin, I have a question for you. Yes, it's regarding the global regulation on sustainable digital infrastructure. Yesterday, Max was talking about why are we celebrating documents if we don't have an effective implementation mechanism. And today, in the BRICS session, someone was talking about the lack of consensus on global regulation. So my question to you is, how important are the emerging regulatory frameworks on digital infrastructure, like the net zero standards, for example, in actually forcing states to adopt more greener, more resilient, and more sustainable digital infrastructure?
That's a really big question. I think, first of all, a lot of these statements and documents, none of them are binding anyway. So, they might be of intent, but beyond that, what do they actually often achieve? I think the question of regulation is, what is the regulation for exactly? And so if it comes to an issue of, say, who bears the burden, for example, I think that's an interesting question, but we've grappled with that in other areas, like I talked about before with fossil fuels and clean energy and net zero and so on. And the global environment now, particularly in this space, is really under strain. So again, is that the best use of our resources and time? I think that's a really interesting question. I suppose those smaller arrangements around how countries work together on addressing some of these issues from a regulatory perspective is a good thing. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm not sure that global landscape right now is one where we're going to see a lot of traction because it's so fractured in the multilateral space. That's a really negative point to end on, sorry.
Okay, we will, unfortunately, we came to the end of the panel. Thank you so much to our esteemed speakers. Thank you to the audience for attending the session. And thank you for Mr. President for attending our session today. Thank you very much. And that's it. Thank you.